Well, Joe Biden should have sacked the head of the Secret Service immediately after Donald Trump nearly took a bullet to the head. This is the most shocking and almost incomprehensible security failure in decades. Yet outrageously, Kimberly Cheatle wasn't sacked. After almost 2 weeks of making excuses, she's finally stood down when members of Congress on both sides of politics called for her resignation and grilled her during a hearing yesterday. And Cheetle finally conceded that the Secret Service fell short in protecting Trump. And yet we are no closer to knowing any real information about the shooter or why law enforcement and the Secret Service didn't act, despite knowing there was a suspicious person on a nearby roof. And why didn't any of them tell Trump or his team not to go on stage? There are many questions and no answers. Joining us now to discuss is former US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's senior advisor, who is now the Executive Vice President at Stevens Inc., Mary Kissel. Welcome. Great to see you once again, Mary. Look, this is the most serious security failure. No adequate explanation given by anyone for how this went so wrong. Do you think there needs to be a stronger push to actually investigate, call a proper inquiry to find out what happened in Butler?
Well, it's great to be with you, Sherry, and good morning from Texas. It is a shocking failure of the Secret Service, but unfortunately, it's not the first time we've had a major failure of that institution. And I would say that what was shocking, Sherry, isn't that the president didn't fire her. What's shocking is that she didn't resign immediately. I mean, who's resigned for the Afghanistan debacle? No one. There's no honor in U.S. politics anymore. It's sad to say, but it's true. I think the only encouraging thing to come out of this is that there was bipartisan condemnation of her, bipartisan pressure on her to resign, and that's what led to her leaving that post. And there will be a bipartisan investigation into the Secret Service, which is very low morale. It's constantly ranked as one of the worst places to work in America. It is very urgent that we fix that agency.
I mean, you worked very closely with Mike Pompeo as his top advisor when he was Secretary of State. There's always risks to any high-profile politician in America. You know, there are a lot of extremists in the country, a lot of access to guns. Do you think other politicians will now be fearful that they too may not be protected?
Well, remember we had that shooting of Republican Congressman Steve Scalise and others at a congressional baseball game just a couple of years ago. Mr. Scalise almost lost his life. We had a home invasion of National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. The security services have allowed constant protests in front of our Supreme Court justices who have themselves called for more security. Layer on top of that you have state-sponsored threats like Iran, who has threatened to kill my former boss, Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, and others. And yes, it's a very complex environment. We are a free society, so there are some restrictions, but certainly you would think that our diplomatic security, our Secret Service, FBI, DHS, and others would be able to do a better job than this. I don't know what the problem is, Sherry. It's probably a multitude of failures over decades, but you've got to ask, what is it going to take for us to get serious about solving them? And unfortunately, you know, a former president almost losing his life. Well, let's hope that that's the crisis that sparks real change. But I'm pretty cynical, Sherry. I'm not sure it will.
No, I agree with you there. Look, I want to turn to Kamala Harris. There's concern that she may not be on the same page as Biden when it comes to Middle East foreign policy. What's your view on her position here and whether she may not be as supportive of Israel as Biden has been over decades?
So the way that you ask that question suggests it's solely a question of foreign policy, but Sherry, unfortunately, it's also a question of U.S. domestic politics. Kamala Harris has to win the so-called blue wall states, which include Michigan. Michigan is a very large Palestinian American population. Recall that during the primary, they lodged a vote of protest against President Biden for his tepid support of Israel. And so I view, and I think many others view, Kamala Harris's strong support of a ceasefire, which would hand Hamas a victory, as not really a foreign policy issue. It's more of a domestic play to win over those key swing votes for Democrats in the states that she needs to win the presidency.
We're going to hear tomorrow morning our time, tonight yours, from Joe Biden for the first time. Are you among those who think he should step down as president if his cognitive decline is so great that he can't run again? Well, what about the next 6 months?
Well, it's no doubt an extremely dangerous period of time. He's already a lame duck president now that he's said that he's not going to run again at the top of the ticket. I think the decision of whether or not he steps down is a decision for him and his family. I would hope that he would do the right thing if he's not mentally capable to do the job. I wish him good health. I think it was kind of a relief to many Americans when they saw him able to walk onto that airplane yesterday of Air Force One, because we haven't seen him since last Wednesday. But Sherry, it's not really a matter of, is Joe Biden competent right now that makes it a dangerous time for America and the free world? We have seen an erosion of U.S. deterrence now for the last 3.5 years that has resulted in many things, whether it's a more aggressive China, whether it's Putin invading Ukraine, whether it's Iran launching direct attacks on Israel, Israel not able to rely on us, so they're launching direct attacks just in these recent days on Houthi targets in Yemen, a major attack over the weekend that they were compelled to do for their own security. So I think in some respects, it's a little misleading. Don't just focus on this one event. Focus on the bigger picture here, and also how we've allowed China, Russia, Iran, North Korea to get together and form an alliance of sorts, an evil alliance that is presenting a huge threat, not just to our interests here in the United States, but to yours, to Japan's, to India's, to Taiwan's. It's a growing threat. We've got to get serious about it, and we've got to get serious about restoring deterrence, because without it, I fear that we're moving toward a greater conflagration, the likes of which we haven't seen in many decades.
No, you're absolutely right. And we talk about that emerging axis of evil often on this program. And that's the one thing that concerns me about the Republican Party, is that there's this isolationist movement, this push for America not to be involved in foreign wars, when at this time, at the most volatile time in decades, we need a United States that is going to play a strong role as a world leader. Just before you go, Mary, does that concern you, that there's this push for America not to get involved in any foreign wars? And if, whoever's the president articulates that, then our enemies know that.
Well, if you had U.S. deterrence, if our enemies feared us, then there wouldn't be foreign wars. Under the last 4 presidents, the only one where Putin didn't invade a foreign country was under President Trump. And I think our record in the Trump administration has been grossly distorted. The idea that we weren't interested in leadership or alliances is simply false. We had a unanimous support from NATO from withdrawing from the INF treaty. We sanctioned Putin's inner circle. We unleashed U.S. energy. We took away his money. We imposed strong tariffs on China. We revivified the Quad. We got together with the European Union and started a dialogue on China that had never happened. We went around the world. We got countries to get rid of Huawei, to wake up to Chinese influence operations.
This was all down
to... This is a lot of work. This
is Mike Pompeo, though, isn't it? This is all thanks to the former Secretary of State.
No, Mike Pompeo answered to President Trump, and every major decision he took was sanctioned by the president. The president sets foreign policy. And I have to say, Sherry, I listened to a lot of this commentary, and it just absolutely befuddles me, because you have to ignore the record of achievement in order to claim that the United States is somehow retreating into an isolationist shell. We're not. If we didn't care about NATO, for instance, why would we go to the trouble to browbeat these countries into simply living up to their promises? Look, 2% is a floor. If you were serious about countering the threat from Vladimir Putin, it should be 3%, 4%, 5%. And those should be discussions happening in European capitals today. European voters should want their leaders to be serious about their own security, not to outsource it. So I think these are necessary conversations. I think The idea that we're not active internationally is ridiculous. And I think that a lot of the fear mongering that's been happening about a second Trump term, I think
Yeah.
is unwarranted. And you've got to look at the record of the Trump era versus the Biden era. What did Biden do? Pulled out of Afghanistan, appeased Iran, paid for our hostages, did nothing to really enact consequences as communist China has become more aggressive. Yes, he did AUKUS. That's great. Yes, he continued the Quad.
And of course,
But he's walking
was Australia's idea, not America's. Mary Kissel, we've got to leave it there, but I have to say, I'm sure everyone watching can see why you were Mike Pompeo's top advisor. Really appreciate your time, as always. Thank you.